The city of Dallas in the early 1990s was a place where the shimmering skyscrapers of the banking district felt worlds away from the decaying streets of Oak Cliff. Yet a singular terror was about to bridge that gap. The story of Charles Albright, the man who would be forever remembered as the eyeball killer, is not just a chronicle of murder, but a descent into a very specific and clinical kind of madness. It began in the winter of 1991, a time when the air in Texas was unusually biting, and the shadows in the vacant lots of South Dallas seemed to stretch longer than usual. On February 10th, the body of Mary Pratt was discovered by a passerby. She was a woman who had seen the harder side of life, but nothing could have prepared the first responders for the state in which she was found. Mary had been shot, a swift end that almost seemed merciful compared to what followed. The killer had used a blade with the skill of a master craftsman to excise her eyes, leaving behind two perfectly circular hollow voids that seemed to stare back at the detectives with an impossible silence. There was no blood spatter consistent with a struggle, and no jagged edges to the wounds. It was as if she had been prepared for an exhibit. The police were initially baffled, searching for a motive that didn't exist in the traditional sense. There was no robbery, and the sexual element was overshadowed by the bizarre mutilation. But the killer was only getting started. In May, the nightmare returned when the body of Susan Kellogg was found near a freeway ramp. A construction worker stumbled upon her, and the description of the scene was hauntingly familiar. Again, the eyes were gone. This time, however, the precision was even more terrifying. Forensic experts noted that the optic nerves had been severed with a single, clean stroke, a feat that requires not only a steady hand, but a deep, intimate knowledge of human anatomy. The city began to hyperventilate. The local news was filled with warnings, and the name eyeball killer began to appear in bold headlines, casting a pall over every dimly lit street corner. The pressure on the Dallas Police Department was immense, but they were hunting a ghost who left no fingerprints and no witnesses, only a signature that felt like a challenge. To understand the monster, one must look at the boy who was raised in a house of suffocating perfection. Charles Albright was adopted by Dell Albright, a woman whose love was a cage. She was a school teacher who demanded absolute obedience and intellectual superiority. Charles was a genius, skipping grades and mastering complex subjects with ease, but he was socially stunted, kept away from other children, and taught that the world outside was a place of filth. His childhood was marked by a chilling incident that foreshadowed his future crimes. It is said that when his mother gave him a doll, he didn't play with it. He took a knife and carefully removed its glass eyes, curious about the mechanism of sight. This curiosity soon shifted to living things. Charles became a self-taught taxidermist, spending his teenage years in a shed, surrounded by the smell of formaldehyde and the sight of flayed skins. He became obsessed with the replacement of eyes, believing that a preserved animal was only as good as the glass stare he gave it. To young Charles, the eye was the only part of the creature that truly mattered, the only part that held the spark of life even after death. As he grew into a man, Albright became a master of the long con. He lived a life of elaborate fabrications, telling friends he was a decorated war hero, a brilliant surgeon, and a secret agent. He was charming and handsome, a silver-tongued predator who could talk his way into any room. He even maintained a stable relationship with a woman named Dixie, who saw him as a quirky but devoted partner. While he was living this lie, he was also prowling the streets of Dallas at night, looking for women who wouldn't be missed immediately. He targeted those on the margins of society, women whose disappearances might be overlooked by a busy police force. His third known victim, Shirley Williams, was found in June 1991. Her death was more violent, involving a brutal beating before the removal of her eyes, suggesting that Albright's internal control was beginning to fracture. He was no longer just a collector. He was a man spiraling into a frenzied need to possess the windows of the soul. The breakthrough in the case came from a combination of old-fashioned detective work and cutting-edge forensics. The police began to look for people with a history of medical obsession or taxidermy. Albright's name appeared in the system due to a series of strange incidents, including a time he had been caught impersonating a doctor. When investigators began to pull the thread of his life, the fabrications started to unravel. The most damning evidence came from a microscopic analysis of the crime scenes. Investigators found several hairs that possessed a rare V-shaped medulla, a genetic trait that was a perfect match for Charles Albright. When they finally moved in to arrest him at his home, they found a residence that was a temple to his obsessions. While the missing eyes were never found, the house was filled with high-end surgical equipment, scalpels, and hundreds of medical drawings focused exclusively on the human face and eyes. During the trial, the atmosphere was thick with a sense of dread. Albright sat at the defense table, often wearing a slight condescending smirk, as if he found the entire legal process beneath him. He would stare at the prosecutors and the witnesses, his own eyes never wavering, a habit that many found deeply unnerving. Witnesses testified about his bizarre behavior, including one friend who recalled Albright showing him a collection of glass eyes and bragging about his ability to perform surgery. The prosecution argued that Albright was a man who felt he had been denied the status and power he deserved, and that his murders were a way of exerting absolute, godlike control over his victims. He wasn't just killing them, he was fixing them, turning them into permanent, sightless trophies that could never look away or judge him. Charles Albright was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison, but the end of the trial didn't bring peace to the families of the victims. The question of what happened to the eyes remained a haunting mystery. Some believe he kept them in a secret location, a hidden cache of his treasures that has never been discovered. Others suggest a more gruesome theory, that he destroyed them or even consumed them in a twisted attempt to gain the strength of his victims. Even in the high-security units of the Texas prison system, Albright remained an object of fascination and fear. He spent his days painting and writing, often focusing on portraits where the eyes were the most detailed and prominent feature. He died in 2020 at the age of 87, taking his secrets to the grave and leaving behind a legacy of terror that still whispers through the streets of Dallas. He remains a chilling reminder that the person sitting next to you, the polite neighbor or the charming stranger, might be looking at you not as a person, but as a potential addition to a dark and private collection.